eXistenZ is a 1990 film by David Cronenberg, who also wrote and produced it. It's a body horror sci-fi. Not that one, or that one, but this one. It was a very forward-looking film, originally written in 1996 about a virtual reality video game that causes a crusade against its designer. It was inspired by an interview with Salman Rushdie, who had a fatwa put on his life due to his book, The Satanic Verses. A fatwa is essentially a legal ruling in the Islamic faith, which can take a number of different forms, but in this case was effectively a death warrant. Rushdie had had several assassination attempts against him since its publication in 1988, including one in 2022. Cronenberg took that concept and applied it to a game designer, someone that created something so addicting and widespread that it represented harm to society. Death threats are an unfortunately common occurrence in the modern era, having been invented by Sideshow Bob in 1993, but there has been nothing as extreme as shown in the film, yet. Despite this, games have ruined lives, through addiction and with the modern gacha systems, monetarily. It's a bit of an aside, but loot boxes are a scourge on the modern landscape, and I blame Team Fortress 2. You can see my video about it here. The late 90s featured a number of films that dealt with themes of alternate realities and transcendence. The Matrix, Dark City, even Fight Club or American Beauty, they were all about finding a life that was different to the mundane. eXistenZ is another of these, although it is a greater focus on not just another level of reality, but a puzzle box of multi-layered realities. In the end, it's revealed they're in a game, inside a game, inside a game, although there is significant bleed-through between worlds. Another interesting note is the film was adapted twice in the same year. Christopher Priest wrote a tie-in novel for the film, something that was more common in the 60s and 70s sci-fi. And there is a graphic novel that is a retelling of the film, written by Cronenberg and illustrated by the Marvel artist Sean Schofield. The art is hyper-realistic, effectively stylized stills from the film, but with more dramatic lighting. It's a direct adaptation with no additional scenes or information, but it's still worth a look. The film itself starts off strong and has great effects throughout, excepting a bit of lackluster CGI, but it loses itself in the second act, with scenes that don't seem to connect up very well, and a lessened sense of urgency. This could partially be explained by the video game framing device. They travel between places instantly because that's where they need to be, and the stilted dialogue and relatively boring locations could be seen as an extension of that, but it makes the whole film feel rushed. And with a runtime of only 97 minutes, it sort of is. One of its strengths, however, is how consistently funny it is. Cronenberg always has a bit of humor in his films, but this one is basically a horror comedy, with the accents of characters, quirky dialogue, even the names of businesses, including the Chinese restaurant, and the country gas station. The characters aren't quippy, and there aren't explicit jokes unlike modern blockbusters. It's more humor from absurd situations, which in general enhances the film rather than taking the viewer out of it. The film also delves into the nature of technology and humans, and how they intersect, something that is in almost all of Cronenberg's films. While the plot and dialogue are not the strongest feature of eXistenZ, the themes and ideas still burn brightly. There's the question of rationality. When people make choices, are they making those through conscious thought and logic, or is it just following a script, a belief of what they should do? One of the more telling lines is from Allegra Geller, the protagonist. You have to play the game to find out why you're playing the game. Why is the key question, and the film offers few answers, leaving it up to the viewer. Most of Cronenberg's films are fairly opaque. There's strange imagery and gross visuals, but the actual messages and themes are more apparent and with a single opinion. eXistenZ and Crimes of the Future, which I reviewed last year, are not as much. There's discussion about being God, of transforming one's own life through art, or even just experiencing art. But even the ending is ambiguous, the final line being a question with no answer. The fact that the opposition force are called realists when it's not clear what reality is further cements the ambiguous nature. The film is more of a series of vignettes than a single story, just like levels in a video game. There are points of thematic interest, fascinating and disgusting visuals, and moments that create a greater story, but ultimately is a thin thread. Despite this, however, these moments make the whole thing work, and all the interlocking pieces may not come together at the end of the film, but they linger for days or weeks, prying at the nature of reality for the viewer. eXistenZ is ultimately flawed looking at it from a traditional perspective. The acting, camera work, dialogue, none of it's above average, and while the effects are certainly top-notch, that's kind of it. Despite this though, the ideas stand strong and make it something special. Individual themes may not appeal to any particular viewer, but chances are there's some particle, some fleshy appendage that does, and it worms its way into the brain, making the whole thing worthwhile. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and be well.